Hi, I'm Max Keiser. Welcome to the Keiser Report. You know, some people are addicted to eating paper. Yes, it's a thing. Strange addictions like these usually start at childhood. They're often related to something missing in one's diet: zinc, iron, gold. But the thing about paper addiction is that you need more and more paper to keep you high. Stacy?
Max, so what we've seen over the past few years since the financial crisis began, these groups of paper addicts have been telling us everything's going to be okay as long as we just add more paper, inject more paper into the system. So I want to look at some of the excuses that paper addicts, who, by the way, they think they look hot, like they're making so much sense, and they're rico suave. But in fact, to the rest of us, we see a pimply-faced, emaciated, slurring his words, no teeth addict lying in the gutter. So, why gold bulls shouldn't get excited by the massive purchases of physical gold in Asia? Because while the gold sell-off has prompted some buying from consumers, it's resulted in panic selling among ETF holders. So of course the ETF is GLD, and this is the paper gold. And he gives this chart from Nomura, and this shows you that ETFs have provided $16.6 billion worth of gold supply year to date. And the red lines represent the investor in GLD buying or selling.
It's propaganda. You know, Joe Wiesenthal and Business Insider over there, Henry Blodgett, they put out this propaganda. And they put out misinformation. They lie to the public by indicating that GLD is in some way related to physical gold. It's just paper gold, and it has a fractionally insignificant meaning when looking at the global physical gold demand that's overtaking the paper market. And Joe Wiesenthal and Henry Blodgett, they're in the gutter. They're degenerates. They're paper addicts. They're sick. They need to go to Paperaholics Anonymous. They need to recover from their paper addiction. And they just outright lie. But, you know, just the way Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs can lie to people, so can Business Insider just lie to people. There should be a law against. There's not. That's why people are buying gold, because they see that these guys aren't in prison.
Well, he says about this chart, so you saw the deep red lines, that those represented the outflows from the ETFs. And he says that this has been massively offsetting any physical demand, not providing any proof of this. He's just saying, as a guy with no teeth slurring his words in the gutter, in the paper gutter, he's saying it must be more than the physical market. I have no proof of this, because he doesn't. Because, as I sent this to Sandeep Jaitley of Bullion Basis, who deals in physical gold and silver, who knows the precious metals markets, and he says that the amount of cash gold bought and sold every day is a multiple of the ETF holdings. And he sent this chart to accompany this, and this is the gold inventory in tons by location. This is up to date, and you see 160,000 tons of physical gold in the possession of the people, human beings of the world. 30,000 tons in central banks, that's the green of this pie chart, and the COMEX gold, that's that little tiny sliver of blue you can barely see, that's 264 tons, and GLD is 1,083 tons, that's in the red.
Warren Buffett, of course, another propagandist who tries to put the line out there that gold has no intrinsic value until he gets his teeth knocked out and the gold in his molars is melted down and used as money. That's right, Warren. Keep going on your paper jihad.
Now, a child will often think this, is they think that their home is the center of the universe, and whatever is happening in their home is happening in the whole world. So here these paper addicts live on Wall Street, and they listen to Paul Krugman. They read his writing every day with addiction, saying this is what Paul Krugman says, so this must be the universe. And these people who hold this 1,000 tons of paper gold, they are the center of our universe. But if you look at the rest of the world, that much is turning over every single day in all the physical markets of the world. This is much bigger. Dubai, for example, in 2011, before this surge, they transacted in $56 billion of gold in the year. So that's just as much in the quarter as what we've seen sold, allegedly, from GLD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you know, that's the thing about the rest of the world. They're trying to escape the grip of the iron tyranny of paper money as printed by the United States, the U.S. dollar. So this is about escaping the U.S. dollar. and people in India, China, Russia, I implore you to continue buying physical gold to escape the dollar, which is why people in Syria are being murdered. People in Iraq were murdered. People in Iran are murdered because America has a paper lust. Joe Wiesenthal, by supporting his paper addiction and paper lust, is sticking the knife into these Asians and Middle Eastern people and twisting it and killing them because they're dying from the poverty that's resulting from this enormous dislocation in the global economy due to paper pushing.
Well, I think the addict in the paper gutter actually really thinks that. They think they're sticking it in with their paper knife into these gold holders. The people have 160,000 tons of gold, dwarfing anything the central banks
But
own.
that's a new phenomenon. Usually, when the price of gold goes down, people have been sellers because they believe Hollywood, they believe Washington, they believe Obama, they believe Bernanke. But now people know that Obama, Bernanke, and Wiesenthal, and everyone in America is full of poo-poo. They don't believe them anymore. So when the price goes down, the demand surges. The demand surges on price breaks. That's something new in the past 50 years. We have not seen this in 50 years. When the price goes down, demand increases because the watchers of this show around the world, in hotel rooms and airports and homes throughout the entire globe, RT goes out to 600 million people. This show gets 20 million viewers a week. And those people are rushing in Australia. They're at ABC Gold, and they're in the hallway. They're saying, Keiser told me to buy gold. And the demand was stampeding for the gold. They love it. They know it. The dollar must die.
So the guys in the paper gutter, much of Wall Street, they are the addicts to this paper. And they find any excuse not to sober up, not to get real, stop injecting the paper into their veins. So let's look at what outside of their paper delusions that are hallucinations brought on by paper addiction. Gold rush from Dubai to Turkey saps supply as premiums jump. Surging demand for gold from Dubai to Istanbul has pushed physical premiums in the region to levels not seen in years as the biggest price slump in 3 decades lures consumers, according to MKS. Now remember, Joe Wiesenthal at Business Insider had said that this physical demand doesn't mean anything compared to how much paper we on Wall Street can generate and sell.
Are you ready for the truth? RTTV.RU. Are you ready for the truth? No, people watch this show and they realize what we're saying is absolutely correct, that their only hope of escaping the paper apocalypse is to buy gold and silver. And that's why they're like Walmart on Thanksgiving Day afterwards, the Black Friday, where people in America stab each other to get 30% off on a toaster. Imagine that mentality applied to somebody with a brain, somebody not a fat troglodyte American idiot who is waddling around from food stamp to food stamp, Jamie Dimon's food stamp program. Remember, imagine the rest of the world. America's only 4% of the population of the world or less. And they're, for the most part, stupid as wood, as a bag of bricks. The rest of the world, however, fairly educated. They see these idiots waddling around at Walmart trying to get 30% off a toaster and stabbing each other. And they're like, I'm going to buy gold. If that's the way the world's going now, I got to buy gold. Now they're rushing in to buy gold. Thank God they are. Thank God they watch a show. Thank you.
Well, that's because on the other side of the equation, you have the paper addicts. And the paper addicts are, just like a drunk on the street is handing out his cash. He thinks like, I'm a great guy. I'm so together. Again, no teeth, pimply face, raggedy clothes, and he stinks like urine. He thinks he's the coolest thing on earth, but he's giving away all his stuff and people are stampeding to take it. Now, premiums paid by wholesalers and bulk buyers in Dubai to secure a 1 kilo bar of bullion are being quoted between $6 an ounce and $9 an ounce over the London cash price, said Frederick Panizzuti, global head of marketing and sales at the Swiss-based bullion refiner. That compares with about 50 cents before the rout. Panizzuti, also chief executive officer of MKS Precious Metals, said in an interview from Dubai. So you see, the premiums are jumping. This is just like prior to the crash, we saw a backwardation. These are the real physical signals that there's a problem in the addiction market, the paper market, that there's a shortage, there's a tightness of supply. And here the premiums jumping many-fold over is showing that there's hard to get the supply.
That's right. The silver is $5 over the paper price right now. $5, 20% more to buy actual physical silver than what's quoted by the paper pushers. And that premium is expanding tremendously. There's a whole new market developing for the physical price of silver. And these paper bugs, whether it's Wiesenthal or Blodgett, they're drinking the ink that they print onto the paper dollars. You know, they see them with that big bottle of like ink, triple X ink, and they're guzzling it down in the gutter, and they have dreams. They have dreams of being trapped in the Bernanke's printing press and being ground down into the mush in the paper and the ink that turns it into their paper apocalypse, and the vision that they have of a world that's made entirely of the illusion of wealth brought on by just printing and printing and printing. And there's Krugman, overlord, looking down on them. Yes, my children, come to my paper nirvana. And of course, when they wake up from their horrible dream, the rest of the world will be stinking rich on gold, and they'll be in the gutter.
Well, let's talk about those people being stinking rich on gold. The gold souks across Turkey and the Middle East are being wiped out of bars, gold bars, jewelry, everything off the shelves. In the gold souk, you see some coins left over, but the investment bars are all gone from the windows, says Schubert at Dubai-based Emirates NBD, the United Arab Emirates' second biggest bank by assets. Domestic retail prices moved to a premium of about $5 an ounce from a small discount before the rout, said Schubert, who has traded the metal since 1979. They also talk about Hong Kong, Singapore, supplies wiped out. And now this guy, Panizzuti from SKS in Switzerland, he says it's not just a Middle East story, it's across the globe. The fact that premiums are so high, it means that no one is making enough. We are producing 24 hours a day. And what sort of market like that, Max, where prices go down and yet they're struggling to keep up with demand?
Well, the converse of that is that they're issuing trillions of dollars worth of bonds or paper, and those prices are going up. So that's the converse of this. There's a huge demand for gold, prices are going down. There's a huge multi-$100 trillion supply of paper and bonds, and prices are going up. So it's a complete repudiation of supply and demand economics brought on by the terrorism, financial terrorism of people like Wiesenthal and Blodgett and Doug Cass and Ben Bernanke. Anyway, Stacy, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
All right, that's it for this half of the show. Stay tuned. We'll be back with a whole lot more. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to go to Bangkok and speak with John Kim of Smart Knowledge U. John, welcome back to the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max. Always a pleasure to be back.
All right, John, we hear stories of traffic jams at bullion shops in Bangkok and Asia. Have you witnessed this? Elaborate for us if you can.
Sure. We've seen some of the strongest buying in Asian markets this time around on the banker raid on gold and silver paper prices. And a lot of the lines in the bullion shops here have been at least a couple-hour waits. And, you know, the interesting thing is, so we've had probably the strongest buying in physical gold since 2008 in Bangkok. The same has been reported in Hong Kong, where the president of the Hong Kong Gold and Silver Exchange Society said that they received they've seen the strongest buying on this takedown in 50 years, Max. So, you know, everywhere in Asia, whether it's Hong Kong, China, of course, has been reported to have imported since the beginning of the year over 1,000 tons of gold from Hong Kong. The Perth Mint has reported the strongest buying since the takedown in 2008. And India also has reported the strongest buying in physical gold since 2008. And the interesting thing about India, Max, is that, as you know, the tax imports on gold have been increased just in the past 13 months from 1%, then they raised it to 2%, then to 4%, and currently stands at 6%. But yet, it's still the strongest gold buying, even with the 6% import tax. So that's just a reported buying through official means. So we know a lot of Indians have been smuggling gold into the country to avoid the tax, or going to other markets, perhaps in China or Singapore, to buy their gold. So there has been massive gold buying in the physical markets, definitely.
All right, I want to direct your attention to that pimple of a country known as America, because one of their propagandists, Business Insider, is reporting that the price of gold, or the physical buying, the surge in physical buying, is meaningless because people are dumping their ETF on the exchange, the GLD, the paper gold. Your thoughts?
Well, the mainstream media, Max, you can never believe 99% of what they say, probably 100% of what they say when it pertains to gold and silver, because he has that statement exactly backwards. What's going on in the paper markets is meaningless. And we've seen that because we've seen a great divergence between the physical prices, the premium, both in gold and silver, over the fake paper spot prices that the bankers are setting. So it's exactly backwards. And even in Asia, like what we see coming out of Singapore through Reuters is the same nonsense. So once the mainstream media, yesterday gold dropped, what, like $4 or $5 an ounce? And then the report coming out of Reuters of Singapore was that gold, people were losing confidence in gold. Gold was down because they're not so sure that gold prices are heading higher. So it's the same nonsense propaganda. What happens in the paper markets is irrelevant. What really is happening in the physical markets now is what's important, Mac.
Let me ask you about what Zero Hedge is reporting, that 99.3% of all COMEX gold sales for the first 3 months of the year came from J.P. Morgan. Zero Hedge thinks the client could be the U.S. government. What do you think?
I'm not so sure I agree with that, Max, only because, J.P. Morgan and the government are in cahoots with the gold and silver price takedown. So if the government was draining J.P. Morgan of their physical gold, they were a buyer, right, of physical gold from J.P. Morgan, it would actually hurt J.P. Morgan's ability to keep making good on those who want to settle their futures contract with physical delivery. But one thing I would actually like to discuss, Max, is really the numbers that we can see, because that's just speculation, right? But we can see facts of what's going on with the COMEX warehouse depositories, what's going on with the registered versus the eligible inventories in both gold and silver. And I think if we look at those numbers, we can see some really interesting things. Eligible inventory is not actually eligible to be delivered to customers that want to close out their futures contracts with physical delivery. Eligible inventory just means that they are clients that parked their gold or silver bullion with the COMEX vaults. Now, the registered inventory is actually the inventory that can be delivered to clients that want to close out their futures contracts with physical settlement. So just since the beginning of the year to the end of April, Max, the eligible inventory of gold stock held at the COMEX declined by 3 million ounces. That's a huge amount. And ongoing after the raid, if you include the decreasing inventories with the ETF. So if you look at the COMEX inventories, then both registered and eligible, and the ETF inventories with the GLD, it's declined by over 5.5 million ounces. So what's going on there? And JP Morgan alone, their eligible inventories decreased in gold from 2 million ounces just at the beginning of the year, and now it's only 161,000 ounces, Max. So what I think what's going on is that people don't trust the banking system to hold their gold, so they're taking all their gold out. That's what I think is going on, why you've had basically a collapse in the eligible inventories in gold.
Right, well, there's a run on gold, just like you had a run on Northern Rock Bank a few years ago, or you would have a run on a bank, people queue up, and they take their money out of the bank. We saw it in Cyprus. Now, what you're describing is that there's a run on gold, physical gold. People are taking that gold out of the warehouses and they're held as inventory. And this is trying to be papered over by the government or JP Morgan or COMEX as not being relevant to the price. The price is not reflecting the fact that there's a run on gold, right?
One actually thing I forgot to mention, even in silver, we have JP Morgan, just yesterday, because I looked at those reports this morning, they actually moved 8.7 million ounces of silver out of their eligible inventory to the registered warehouses. So that's really curious to me, Max, because maybe it's showing that they are trying to prevent people that are asking even for physical silver from getting it, because they moved it out of the eligible now into the registered that can settle futures contracts. So perhaps they are worried about a shortage of physical silver, making good on silver's longs and the silver futures that want physical settlement. So that's really interesting as well.
John, let me ask you something. Are we about to win? In other words, you've been on the show over the years. We've talked about this. We've set up a conflict between the paper versus physical. We've encouraged the world to take physical delivery to push the paper pushers like JP Morgan into bankruptcy and to cause a default on COMEX, to stop the world from being strangled by the tyranny of fractional reserve banking and everything that goes with market manipulation, whether it's LIBOR or CDS or everything that goes with it. If the inventory in these exchanges is now at basically zero, are we now on the threshold of a major default, John?
I think so. I think that's what we're getting to. I think actually the bankers shot themselves in the foot with the most recent raid on the paper prices. And I always emphasize the difference between paper and physical, because as you pointed out, we are also seeing a divergence, very much so in the between the physical and the paper prices and precious metals. So I think the bankers had planned on this takedown having the opposite effect. I think they thought that they could get holders of the physical PMs to panic sell out and sell to them. But instead, what happened is they caused a massive frenzy of buying of the physical metals, which is only going to hurt their ability to keep the charade, the fraudulent futures markets alive. So I don't know how imminent the collapse of the COMEX will be, but certainly it's going to make their fraud a lot more difficult to execute in the future, I believe.
Right. It was a let them eat cake moment. There was eventually in the court of France, they just went one step too far, and they've ignited a revolution, and they all got their heads cut off. So what we're saying here is that the paper pushers have just gone one step too far with this latest raid on paper prices, and it triggered a massive buying panic around the world. Now, the U.S. Mint has suspended sales of gold ounce coins. They suspended sales of silver 1 ounce coins way back in January. Is this unusual for so early in the year for them to suspend sales? And doesn't this point again to shortages of metal? And how many ounces were sold before the sales were suspended, John?
So yeah, either it means there's a shortage of metals, or it just means that the U.S. Mint realizes that the prices are so artificially low as well that they're not willing to sell at these prices. So that, that could be the case with mints around the world, as well as the bullion dealers. Some they're saying they're sold out. They may really be sold out, or just unwilling to sell any more inventory at these low prices. But as far as how many ounces were sold, we had more sales of 1 ounce American Eagle coins, Max. Let me actually find it because I wrote it down. Okay, so we had 1 ounce American Eagle, 63,500 sold on April 17th. Now, on one day in April, because of this banker raid, they saw more than the entire amount for the month of March. Now, year to date, they've sold over 500,000 ounces of physical gold. And up to this point in 2012, they had only sold 230,500 ounces. So it's more than doubled.
Okay, another theme, John J.S. Kim, is that over the past few years, we've been talking about China has been creeping into the position of being the largest sovereign holder of physical gold. Where do we stand on this? Officially, they have 1,050 tons. I just saw a report recently that they've got just under 2,000 tons. Jim Rickards, of course, a friend of this show, thinks that they're getting close to 4,000 tons, and I've just heard a report saying that they're well over 8,000 tons. So there's a lot of disparity on this. What's the current thinking, John?
Well, I think right now it's just like a big game of poker, right? No one wants to show their hand. And I think all the official reported gold reserve holdings of every country, I think, is grossly wrong. So I don't believe the U.S. has 8,133 tons of gold like they claim. I think a lot of it was sold out into the open market during the 80s to keep the price of gold down. That's gold that's never come back into the vaults of the Fed Reserve. China, as we know, lied for 6 years, right, from 2003 to 2009. They said they only had 600 tons, but then they came out and said they had over 1,000 tons. So we know that they have a lot more than what they're saying. If they indeed have imported, like it's been reported out in London, 1,000 tons just from Hong Kong this year, that's only a third of the year. So at that rate, they would import 3,000 tons on an annualized basis, which is more than the total annual global world gold production. So, whether I believe they have well over 2,000 tons already, but whether that number is 4,000, 6,000 tons. And Max, don't even forget about Russia, right? Because Russia's official gold holdings is only a little bit behind China's at 980 or 978 or something like that. Then everyone knows Russia has been accumulating massive amounts of gold very secretly as well.
Right. Now, finally, the Bank of Japan and the Swiss National Bank are now buying equities. Other central banks say they will soon do the same. So the quantitative easing now is spilling into the paper world of paper-based equities. What are your thoughts there? We've got about 20 seconds.
Oh, okay. Well, basically, it's just going to create a more massive bubble. So it's just they're just trying to sucker people into a bubble that's going to collapse and get them to move from hard assets to paper when we should be moving from paper to hard assets like physical gold, physical silver.
All right. John J.S. Kim, we're out of time. Thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Okay, thank you, Max.
Okay, and that's all the time we have for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I want to thank my guest, John Kim of smartknowledgeu.com. If you'd like to send us an email, please do so at keiserreport@rttv.ru. Until next time, Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.